Hi, welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So what happens when the organisation development team doesn't sit in HR but reports directly to senior leadership instead? What difference does that make? How does it shape when OD gets involved and what it influences and the impact that it has? Thomas Lindqvist is Senior Director of Organisational Development at King. Now, King is the Swedish video game developer behind the game that took over the world, Candy Crush. And King was bought by Activision Blizzard for $5.9 billion. And you may know Activision Blizzard for Call of Duty. So for those gamers amongst us, you will know that these are huge worldwide gaming titles. Now, Thomas brings a fascinating approach to OD, and we're absolutely delighted that he can join us. He's a critical thinker, organisational designer, coach, writer, and musician, and someone who brings real range and rigor to the craft of OD. Thomas has had a fascinating career leading as an agile coach in many organisations, including Spotify, Tokaboka, and Hyper Island. And Thomas is based in Sweden and works across multiple geographies as well. On top of his career at iconic, fast-moving tech companies, he's had extensive training in a wide range of tools and methodologies such as Kinevan, Human Systems Dynamics, and Prosky. And if that wasn't enough, he also has a degree and a master's along with a qualification in journalism. So it's a real honour to have Thomas join us. He's a busy man and a fast-moving organisation, so we really appreciate his time. So thank you for joining us, Thomas.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
It's lovely to have you with us. So just to kick us off, just tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing currently, a bit about your role.
Well, yes. So I head up the organizational development team at King, working primarily towards two main titles, Candy and Soda, and they are sort of global games. What I'm doing, or I try to do, is to help all these organizations become healthy and high performing. That is sort of the mission or the mantra of the OD team. So we are constantly asking ourselves this question: are we now healthy and high performing? And if not, then what? And that's an ongoing process that will never end. So to accomplish this, I have a very, very small but capable team. So there's three of us in total.
I was going to say organisation development looks very different in very different organisations. So what does it look like in King? What would somebody see you doing, you and your team?
For us in particular, looking at the system that we operate in, we have to find the leverage points, right? Where can we intervene to have the most impact? And for us, that has over the years become a question of intervening with the leadership teams primarily and the individual leaders, and to help them diagnose and understand and make sense of their own organizations, and guide them through the process of understanding, well, if we're not quite there yet, and we never are, right? We're never perfect, then what needs to change? What needs to be different? So that's basically what we're doing. And further down in the org, we are offering leaders primarily coaching and offering help to support them in them building their leadership teams further down the organization. So that's our choice of that's our inflection point.
Are you working in a hybrid or kind of fully remote setting?
So this is a hybrid setting. Okay. We have offices around Europe primarily, an office as well over in San Francisco, I believe. But in Barcelona, Berlin, Stockholm, Malmö, it's a hybrid setting where we rather invest in meeting couple of times a year for high impact individual interactions, but primarily we're working remotely.
How does that impact how you diagnose or kind of understand what's really going on in the system when everybody's kind of dispersed like that? What approach do you take to get underneath?
I wouldn't say it impacts the way we diagnose things, because we can still have these important conversations with people and hear what they have to say. And of course, we are big listeners. That's what we do. It does impact, however, how we intervene in the system. And there are some interventions that really require that we are in the same room with people physically. And anyone who's done facilitation will probably agree with me here that, that makes a difference, to feel the energy in the room, to read body language, even a small thing as a sigh. It matters when you really want to be in the room with people. So diagnosis works well. Interventions in the room with people as far as we can make it.
Obviously, in the introduction, we talked about the fact that you don't necessarily sit within the HR team. And this is the eternal debate that goes on within organisation development. So where should it live? And I think you're probably the first OD team that doesn't necessarily sit closely with HR in this. Where are you in the organisation, and how does that work in practice?
Yes. So the OD team in King Brown Working was sort of founded by me. And I said quite clearly that I need to be very close to where decisions are made. And this comes from the core understanding, of course, that there's no mandate within OD, and it shouldn't be, because then we become something else. We are coaches, facilitators, advisors, teachers. But as soon as we move away from the people who need our help, and there's something between ourselves and the people that we're trying to help, things get a bit distorted. That's been my experience. And I've been lucky enough to partner with good leaders across King to establish that relationship. And it has been very successful. It's my experience. It's really been the difference that made a difference for us.
Brilliant. And you talked about being close to decision making. How does OD enhance decision making at King? What's involvement and how does it intervene?
Well, in several ways, I think. I mean, if we're close to leadership teams, that we, of course, expect to make these decisions, and ultimately accountability goes up to the senior leader, whom we are executive coaches to. We have good visibility into what problems they are sort of trying to tackle. And how they reason about that and what that group process looks like, but also how the internal process of the individual leaders look like. We understand the politics, the tensions, and everything that goes on. And that makes us well positioned to, without agenda and being neutral, I think this is key here. We are not on the field playing the game. We're on the sidelines watching people play. And this is a very luxurious position. Not many people invest in that and feel that they can afford that in these days of, economic downturn and a cry for accountability and performance and results. But to have a few people like myself being on the sidelines, watching the game being played, has been very, very impactful, I think, because we can help the person who is playing the game, or the groups that are playing the game, to step out of themselves and hold up a mirror to that and say, listen, this is what we see going on, and how do you feel? How does that resonate with us, with you, the observations that we're making? And since we can deliver those observations completely free of agenda, truly neutral position, it becomes impactful. They tend to listen more when that is the case. And if you move in political landscapes, there's always a suspicion of agenda or the suspicion of loyalties. And that's natural, as it should be. This is not a complaint. It's an observation of how humans work together. But I think that neutrality has been very beneficial for us, and I hope we can preserve that going forward.
There are games at play, aren't there? Look, we just fall into patterns. Different areas will react in different ways to other departments, and I guess that you're not having a stake in the outcome other than for the organisation to be healthy and high performing. That is kind of your agenda in a way, isn't it? That's what you're working in the service of.
Indeed, and that has been sort of very clear from the beginning. That's the only reason why we are intervening, because we are seeing that that right now you are not as high performing and healthy as you could be, and for these reasons I'm telling you this. So I think to give some more color to that, I've always, even as an agile coach previously in my career, positioned myself as a professional helper. And if I'm not helping, then what am I doing? So whatever I do needs to be helpful for the organization. It needs to be in the service of the organization. That means that I can speak truth to power. It means that I can call out when things are not working and when I see dysfunctional behaviors, and et cetera, which is the license we give to facilitators maybe in workshops. Like we can deal with that on a Thursday afternoon, but I'm asking my organization to deal with that permanently every day of the week, year after year, which is a big ask. But I think kudos to the people that I work with. They embrace that and have learned to enjoy the challenge that I bring.
Well, yeah, because there is a certain amount of it's very progressive, isn't it? Sometimes, particularly at senior level, the stakes are high. So it's very easy to perceive winners and losers about who gets resources, who gets the priority and whatnot as well. And you're introducing a challenge in there on top of the interfunction challenge as well. So that, again, that's quite progressive. Is that something that's always been embedded in the culture from day one, that sort of come from the leader, or is that something that sort of developed over time as being an essential capability for our way of working?
I think it's an interesting question, and tying back to what I think you said earlier, that it looks very different across different organizations. And I think it was a contracting between myself and the lead that I've been working most closely with, where I sort of lay down the law. And I had actually a job offer in my back pocket, because I was in negotiation, and I was quite surprised when he just said, well, that sounds brilliant, let's go with that. So I owe much of this success that I think that I've had during recent years to the great collaboration and that I have with the person who actually makes the decisions. And that partnership has been, maybe a once in a lifetime thing, to be honest. And I think we've achieved a lot because of it.
And you talked about, there's one thing I'm dying to ask a question about. You said healthy and high performance. Are they mutually exclusive? Like, is it not one or the other? Like, how do those two things coexist? Because a lot of organizations, it is either one or the other, or it's perceived as.
Yeah, I think one can simplify it to talk about long-term and short-term. It's quite easy to achieve high performance in the short term, depending on how you measure high performance. And we also try to simplify that. You are a high-performing organization if you reach the objectives that you set out for yourself. That's our definition of high performance. Nothing fancier than that, because then it gets difficult and complicated. You are high-performing if you reach the objectives that you set out for yourself. But are you healthy? Well, you are healthy. You can make that, repeat that success over time. It speaks to sustainability. And that means that you can't cheat your way towards high performance. You can't fire everyone and then have a massive revenue per head count number. And then, you will be doomed next quarter or next year. So it speaks about sustainability, how to deliver on the objectives while also making sure that your organization is well set up for the future. It's a short-term, long-term thing. It's a balance in that mission that I have crafted for myself to the team, is that sort of doing well now, but also doing well tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's really important, isn't it? Because when you're talking about conversations, because it's almost like a polarity, isn't it? Short term, long term, or healthy and high performance. And it's about getting the balance right. And when people are advocating for a particular proposal, it often favours one or the other. So do you find you're sort of helping to sort of create better balance in conversations, do you?
Well, of course. I mean, the brilliant tool of polarity management or interdependent pairs that we talk about in other parts of the same conversation. What I do really is I bring that to the decision makers and I help them see this. And sometimes they might make decisions that are more short term. And sometimes they realize that long term needs to be invested into as well. But there's always a balance, and it moves back and forth between these two polarities. But I think that's the case for any business everywhere. I think the difference is holding up that mirror, making sure that that's part of the conversation.
And holding up the mirror isn't necessarily telling them what you think. Sometimes it's a little bit more nuanced than that. What tactics do you use for holding that mirror up respectfully?
Well, not always respectfully. I mean, I think in group settings, of course, I'm more timid, and I'm sort of introducing different ways of looking at things, such as long term, such as always introducing sort of the systems view here. Well, they might be very eager to introduce some changes, and I'm the one who says, well, what about that over there? There are things happening over there that might be impacted by what we're talking about now. How do you consider this, etc., etc.? So this is something that I bring to the table. But I think in one-on-ones, in sort of the executive coaching part, and here I make a distinction between coaching and executive coaching because I think they are different beasts. When I do executive coaching, I can't show up to a senior leader and ask weird Socratic questions. How do you feel about that? I mean, it can't be fluffy bunny, as Snowden would say, of cognitive edge fame. It needs to be really relevant to them. So what I need to do in those circumstances, a bit more of what I call combat coaching, which is coaching, but with, gusto, so to speak.
You've just introduced a new term to the OD dictionary that is brilliant.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I guess what I'm coming from here is that coaching can sometimes be seen as very sort of, well, how do you feel? It's very soft, it's very kind. And how do you feel about that? Whereas I might enter a coaching situation, and this is what I call executive coaching, where I say, well, what on earth were you thinking doing that? And being a bit more pointy. And what I've come to realize over the years is that many of the people that I engage with at this executive level, debate is their way of reaching the best possible decision. They expect to fight it out. They expect people to tell them in hard language that they're absolutely bonkers and mad for even thinking about this. This is how they engage with each other at the top. And if you enter that atmosphere or that climate and you go, well, how do you feel? They were like, well, who are you and why are you wasting my time? So rather, what I've been doing is more like trying to simulate that and be part of the debate and being a bit more, well, you're about to make a massive mistake. Have you thought about that? That doesn't sound like that's not a neutral coaching question, is it? That's more like, testing the waters, really sort of engaging with the leaders because they want that. And everyone's mileage will, vary here. So this is not to be taken as universal advice, but this is a coaching stance that I've not seen that much explored, certainly not in literature. But what I've seen work rather well. Yeah. So go to war a bit with them and, enjoy that.
Yeah, there's a natural kind of style that you often see at senior team level, which is more drawn to that kind of debate style. And you kind of articulate it really clear, which is like there is that kind of not necessarily win-lose, but if I'm going to change my mind, then you have to really get into my point and you've got to kind of convince me because my mind is pretty much made up already. It's like, how do you do that in the most expedient and efficient way? When you don't have a vast amount of time with them, you don't have, I'm assuming, like 2-hour coaching sessions with them. It's kind of short, sharp sessions.
How do I do that? Yeah, that's the magic, isn't it? I think what I tend to do is to do the classic things like let's investigate. Are we using that word in the same way? It's a classic one. What assumptions are hidden beneath this? Have you? Risk is always a good one. Have you considered the risks? And usually we find ourselves in discussions that are more temporal, like when do we do this? And then I become the one who talks about the cost of not deciding, and what does standing still look like for you? And I guess I'm just trying to muddy the waters for them a bit, which sounds very counterintuitive. But usually what executives also do is that they come in with a solution. And the way my engagement with leaders have developed is that I reduce as much clarity as possible around that solution because they think they have that clarity, right? So what I do is I muddy the waters a lot and I ask a lot of difficult questions. And, it's a bit like the double diamond of design thinking. So you open up and then you have to close in. So at the end of a coaching session, I try to clear the waters again. But now the waters are even more clear or crisp and hopefully beneficial for the organization as a whole. So I'm trying to influence the decision making in this way. And I think sometimes the decision stays the same, but then they have learned something about change management, because I made it clear to them that some of the things that they might be proposing to do will not be perceived in the best way. Have you thought about that? And then they realize, well, maybe I have to engage a bit differently and with more, more engagement really in trying to make my decision that I have made now a reality.
And if anybody is watching this and you're wondering about good tactics to use with senior leaders, just play this bit back again. Because there is
good heavens. Yeah, be careful though.
We have to kind of learn your style, don't you, as well, I think. But you also have to work within the context that you find yourself as well. But those things, just getting the manager to pause. And I think there's a saying that's always stuck with me, which is a way to describe senior leaders. I'm more often certain than I am right. So,
well, that's very true. But that's also because I think leaders, to be able to take action in complex environments, they don't know it from theory that like we might do, but they know it from instinct that, to make sense of this messy situation, the only thing to do is act. I can't analyze my way out of this. And this is one of the big messages from complexity theory that we have. You need to act and then see what happens. So I'm also mindful of that in my engagements. I don't want to talk them out of acting. I don't want them to be paralyzed if I think any action will be better than no action. So that's also something to keep in the back of your mind. But and I think some leaders, as you say, they need that certainty to be able to even continue to function as leaders. They need to be sure of themselves. And sometimes I think, and this goes maybe deeper into psychology, is that some leaders might resent that the conversations that you have with them as an executive coach can take away that certainty that they sort of needed, and they will resent that. So that's why I think there's always this loop back when you talk to senior leaders that is sort of, well, to remind them that I'm not trying to talk you out of this. I'm trying to give color to the decision that you're trying to make. I'm trying to help you understand the impact of the decision you're trying to make. And I'm trying to help you make this decision in the best possible way. Because if you're the coach that keeps talking senior leaders out of making decisions, then eventually both the senior leaders you're supporting and yourself will find yourself out of a job.
Hi, we're just pausing this interview for a moment. Have you ever finished an episode of the OrgDev podcast and wish you had a cheat sheet that summarizes all of the key points? Us too, so we made one. It's called From Pod to Practice, and each week in our newsletter we'll share a 2-page summary of the latest OrgDev episode, and it includes key takeaways, a reflection prompt, and one small action you can try.
And it's all in a digital format with space at the end to add your own notes and reflections, and it's designed to help you take the learning from the podcast into your day-to-day work. So to get your copy, just sign up to our Next Step to Better newsletter. The link's in the show notes, or you can visit our website at www.distinction.live to get the latest From Pod to Practice in your inbox. And let us know what you think. We'd love to get your feedback. So one question we like to ask everybody who comes on is kind of, what was your journey into organisation development? It's really always interesting to see people's kind of weird and wonderful journeys into the field. So how did you arrive here?
So yes, well that's a long story actually, but I'm going to try to make it a bit shorter. I started what I would call the professional helping role, which is sort of the umbrella term for the roles that I've had during my career as an agile coach. And I transitioned into that from product management. So I was the head of product eventually at a startup, and I learned sort of the agile ways of working and all the connotations there, all the implications of that way of working. And as I was recruited from that startup into what I would call a real organization that actually had a customer base and a revenue stream and all that that had existed for a while, I was recruited into a product owner position. This is a specifically agile position. It exists in the Scrum framework, as you know. And what happened there was that the CTO was bringing development home. It was outsourced before that. He accepted the job as a CTO, but only on the condition that he would be able to have development in-house. And then he found a product owner in me. And I learned quickly that, this is not an organization that is set up to make this work. So I talked myself out of the product owner job, and I talked myself into the agile coach job. And that was a role that did not exist when I was just a young boy. But it appeared as a role out of necessity, I think. People struggled with this new idea at the time. So I took on that job. And I found that it was even more interesting to develop organizations than it was to develop products. So to me, the organization is the product. We could talk deeply and for hours about that and how that's an interesting metaphor, but we shall not. We shall move on. And so that's what I did then for 10 long years, I think, in the Stockholm tech environment. That was, the economy was looking good. People were investing in startups and there were jobs to be had. And people sought out my help. And then the agile coach role fell out of favor a bit. Eventually, I ended up at Spotify doing the agile coach job there. And then I transitioned to King because it fell out of favor, really, that role at Spotify. And at King, I quickly realized that, the same thing is about to happen here. And then I had that negotiation with my manager. And I said, well, you might not want this, but you do want professional helpers. And this is really what we do. So give me a promotion, make me the director of it, this brand new OD function, and give me more money. And surprisingly, he said yes. And well, the rest is history, really.
And you mentioned there Spotify, which, we can't let that slide because Spotify gets held up by so many as kind of a really interesting model and people try to adopt it. And, that doesn't always work, does it? Because context really matters. So what do people get wrong about that model and when they're looking at that as a kind of exemplar of how to run an organization?
Yeah, because this is the world of squads and tribes and a whole vernacular, isn't it, of different words and terms, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, looking back now, I would say that what Spotify arrived at is what org design looks like when you leave it to people who haven't studied org design. And I'm saying that in the most generous way because that was actually a good thing for them. Because had they listened to the org design community and that whole framework, they would not have arrived at this model. This was an engineering-driven, entrepreneurial group of people who just asked themselves, what should we do here? And they arrived at these really interesting solutions. And that's why it was innovative in its time. And I mean, for instance, the practice of having removing the line manager from the team and having that person report across, being a line manager and being across several squads, that was a sort of innovation in the matrix thinking. I think that we might have seen that before, but they went further with it, and the reason why they did that was so that people could easily move between teams and squads and whatnot without changing the line manager. So they wanted that consistency of the line manager, but the flexibility of moving people around. This is a brilliant thing because it solved the problem that they had at the time. If you want to introduce that in other organizations, well, you run into all kinds of difficulties and problems. And I think that model was maybe the first that was abandoned by Spotify when they were forced to grow up after their IPO and preparing for that. And that was also part of why the agile coaching community sort of fell away a bit. Because they did no longer want to have that trinity of people working with the squads and the teams and making things work. The products person, the agile coach, and the engineering manager, where the engineering manager took care of sort of the people side of things. Engineering manager for Spotify was someone who helped engineers grow in their role and develop. It was all about line management, people management. They were not involved in technical decisions or things like that. And I think that was, I still to this day agree with that model, because I think if engineers need help growing and learning their craft, there are many, many avenues available to them to do that. They don't need a person telling them that. What they do need, however, I think, is help in navigating the organization, growing their collaboration skills, growing their planning skills and coordination skills and all kinds of things, but not tech per se, not code per se. I think Spotify realized this early on, and I think made a good job at that. Whereas today we are back to sort of the engineering manager role, being the sort of the leader of the team, being the line manager for the engineers and sort of telling them more what to do and also how to do it. I think that's a move in the wrong direction, but that's where the industry is going.
And how has being an agile coach informed your practice as an OD practitioner? Like, what kind of grounding did it give you, and what have you sort of brought into OD from there?
Well, I think agile coaching as a craft, it took on many forms, as OD does as well, of course. But agile coaching was always centered around sort of the practices of the team delivering software. But to make that work, you had to look beyond the team. And this is sort of where we as a community, I think, eventually fell short. Because agile coaches are rarely invited to the executive suite, doing sort of the work that I'm doing now. There was sort of a cap to how far up in the organization an agile coach was sort of permitted to go. And I think for me, again, as a professional helper, agile coaching from the start was about the organization, not about the development team. So I had maybe a different journey than other agile coaches. But to answer your question, I think Dialogic OD, when that arrived, it really bridged the gap between how I think agile coaches traditionally would operate and the values they will bring to the table. I mean, OD's been around for a long time, since the 1950s, and agile coaching is much more new invention. But I think the gap between sort of the diagnosis and sort of the top down, and a bit like the old days of OD, and where we are today with Dialogic OD, I think agile coaching is somewhere like a bridge, marrying those two sort of polarities between the old and the new. So I think that was valuable. And I also think if you look at org design, the first thing we do is try to figure out the value stream, right? How is value created in an organization? That's what we're interested in. And agile coaches are very, very, very knowledgeable when it comes to how value is created in a tech company. We come from a background of actually trying to help these units that actually deliver the value to the customer operate in a good way. And that means that we come into these conversations well armed with knowledge from sort of the trenches and from the ground. And we know how value is created. And I think that helps us, and that's helped me certainly a lot. Executives further up in the organization, unfortunately, could lose touch of that. And then one of the jobs that I think that I do is to sort of bring them down again towards that. You should worry about how value is created, and more and less about maybe some corporate nonsense that we can also worry about.
So, Thomas, you've done some great qualifications, such as Cynefin and Human Systems Dynamics and Procy as well. How have they kind of informed your practice? Like, have you been able to utilize those, or has it shaped your thinking about organizations?
Well, in a very big way, I would say. So I sometimes think about agile as stone soup. Have you heard the fable of stone soup?
No.
I will now tell you the fable of stone soup. Right. Maybe this is a Nordic thing, but I think it's called stone soup in British. So this is man coming to, well, it could be a woman, but it was probably a man in the fable, to be honest. They're coming to a village, and it's a bit of a scam artist, and he says, well, I can make you the most wonderful soup just out of stone. And the villagers go, well, that's amazing. We want to learn about this stone soup that you're making. And he boils a cauldron. It's a cauldron, you see, it's a fable of water. And there's a stone in there. And then he tastes it and he says, well, it could use a bit of salt. And the villagers go, oh, I got salt, and run away and get salt. And that carries on. It could use some onions, maybe some potatoes, and on and on and on and on. So eventually, of course, they made vegetable soup. And the villagers are also amazed. This is amazing soup just out of stone. It's amazing. Of course, the stone is removed, and so I sometimes think about Agile as stone soup, because what the Agile community did over the years was that they borrowed and stole and reinvented from everywhere, and they brought all these interesting things in. Systems thinking, and for some of the people in the Agile community, that was Agile. This is an Agile practice, like Peter Senge's Fifth Disciplines book. This is an Agile book. It was not. It's not. So where am I getting with this wonderful fable? The thing is, they borrowed and stole and reinvented so many things, and I think complexity thinking, like Kinevin and Snowden and what came from there, and the human system dynamics, that was sort of labeled in the Agile community. So this is our tribe, this is our family. It has really nothing to do with Agile, other than that they are very good approaches to explain why Agile was a good idea in the first place. But they were not there when Agile was conceived. And they're being a bit misused today, I would say. But for me, as an OD practitioner, I think complexity thinking has really been a very powerful tool to help me explain not what to do necessarily, but what's going on, the sense-making aspect of it. Helping people see their own reality through the lenses of these practices and tools. It's been very, very influential. And I think it's a wonderful contrast, by the way, if you met with Glenda from Human Systems Dynamics, and you met with Dave from Cognitive Edge. No, it's the Kinevin company now. You couldn't think of two more different personalities. I mean,
Dave Stone is a certain flavour.
I mean, I love them both to bits. Well, from afar, of course. But I mean, it was 10 years ago today when I traveled to London, and because I heard of Kinevin, and when you hear theory that explains your own experience, you get triggered, right? It's like, this is so interesting. I need to go there. So I jumped on a plane with a good friend of mine who was a management consultant at the time. We flew over, and we had this session with Dave. And again, 10 years ago. And I had this question to him that I asked. I said, well, sir, because you're really quite sort of, sir, because he's so brilliant and is, academic, and, he doesn't hide that fact at all. And I asked, well, here's my concern, sir, I said. I'm struggling to get the leaders that I work with to even understand systems thinking. And now you're here introducing something that's sort of beyond that, even more sophisticated, even more difficult. Do you think that maybe systems thinking could be a sort of a gateway drug to complexity thinking? And Dave said, he looked at me and he said, no. And then he moved on to the next question.
We're thinking about the same person, aren't we?
And then, a few years later, I went to Roffey Park, and I had my experience with Glenda, with Human System Dynamics. Both complexity thinkers, and the experience could not be more different in terms of warmth. But both brilliant. I think they have a hate-love relationship, those two, and I think they enjoy each other, and I enjoy them. So I think it's brilliant. That was a very long and weird answer to your question, but no, the thinkers that support us with all the deep thinking and research around complexity are really, really valuable, and I think they are furthest along to help us explain how to actually deal with this sort of human condition of collaboration in organizations. So I think that's where the future is.
So you touched on there, which is something that we really think about a lot, is about meeting our clients or our stakeholders where they are. And we can get high on our own supply, can't we? Like, it's like, oh, look at this, it's so interesting. I think I found the meaning of everything. And they are where they are. They do not think about all this stuff day in, day out, do they? How do we do it? How do we introduce not even complexity thinking, but systems thinking and those kind of concepts to people? So we kind of, because there's a certain arrogance to our profession, isn't there? In terms of we believe that we're right. We believe that, we have the way. But we have to meet people where they are, don't we?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I have. And the younger version of me got really frustrated with this because, and I actually had a manager pull me aside and say, Thomas, I understand your frustration, but you have to realize that you're over there. These people are over there. And you're so far ahead with your book learning and, the trainings and everything that you do. And, that's not their fault and that's not your fault, but you have to sort of fix that situation, because if you're going to get frustrated every time they don't get what you get, then, you're going to have a short career. And that was a good wake-up call for me. And it is very difficult. What I try to do is introduce things bite-sized. So when I have, for instance, a leadership team in front of me and I have a customer and I have a full day plan for them, what I do is I cheekily, in breaks, put together from my 1,000 slides that I have, I put together a few slides that addresses something that we talked about during the day, that makes it tangible for them. It's real for them. And then I say, well, I heard you talk about these problems and these situations, and I heard you reasoning about that in this way. So allow me, I flew over from Stockholm to London. So please, I made the trip. Can I have 10 minutes of your time? And then I introduce to them, here's an alternative explanation model to what you're experiencing right now. It's a different way of thinking about it. This is what the theory and the research says. And then I just do a quick Thomas talk for 10 to 15 minutes. And usually that becomes sort of a segue into them wanting to hear more. And that's because it's relevant to what they're thinking about right now. And if you address an executive and from nowhere, the room is cold, no conversations has been had, good morning, I'm going to talk about Kinevin. I mean, that's not going to fly with them, because it doesn't mean anything to them. It has no relevance to them. And executives are dealing with a million things at a time. And they're out of time. It needs to be relevant. So that's how I try to do it. I sneak the theory in and make sure it's relevant to them.
We've got combat coaching and Thomas talks. These are great terms.
What do you enjoy most about the work you do? What really brings you joy and sparks interest?
Good question. I mean, it's problem solving, isn't it? It's really sophisticated problem solving that requires system thinking and complexity thinking as a tool. It's multidimensional. And what I really enjoy the most is it's like the A-team. I love it when a plan comes together. And it takes a long time. That's the biggest problem that I have. But that's also why I'm in an organization and not being an external contractor or consultant, is that I want to see the results of what I bring to the table. And after a few years, when you have the organizational structure that works and you have everything else aligned, the STAR model and all that, and you have new behaviors that fits well, and suddenly things are humming, it's that's the greatest feeling on earth, isn't it? Because you really, for all the people in the organization, you changed something. You made their lives better, and the organization flourishes because of what you did. And then 2 months later, something happens and you have to start over. So you have to enjoy those small weeks or months when the organization is actually healthy and high performing, but then something happens and you start over.
That really resonates. And when you look at the field of OD, is there anything that's particularly catching your attention in terms of theories or approaches or kind of new ideas, anything that's exciting you?
Oh, that's a good one. No, not right now. I think Dialogic OD was the last really big thing that took us places.
Yeah.
I think the field of leadership development is ripe for a revolution. Hope something happens there soon. Or shall see.
Well, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because within the OD profession, if you look at Mian Chung Judge's Quality and Equality, she's brought a lot of the best thinkers in recent years together, and they're getting towards retirement age, and there isn't necessarily that thrust of new approaches and theories coming through. So it really is, the gauntlet's been thrown down to the next generation of OD practitioners, hasn't it? To come, or to academics as well, to come up with new theories, because the train is changing, isn't it?
I think that's very true. But I think we are currently in a period of l- low innovation, and that's because of many things. You can watch the political landscape, and you can see how sort of the history of ideas, if you will. We are seeing a backlash to the sort of humanistic revolution that we all came from in OD, with a return to command and control, a return to single accountability, one neck to wrangle. We are seeing a neoconservative movement. I think that's deeply interesting to me, but I think we can tie that in together as a package. This has to do with the economy. It has to do with how societies and move globally. So I think now is not an age of innovation. Now is an age of going backwards a bit to then go forward again when the wheel turns. We are seeing the end of the counterculture that started in the 60s and gave birth to so many promising things. But right now we must wait and see. Just stay relevant and stay alive for a while until it's our turn to get back into the game and offer new solutions and ideas. But this is not the time. Sorry for being pessimistic.
Well, no, but it's important to zoom out and to look at the cultural context as well, isn't it? You know, the full thrust of all the postmodern stuff that came through, you know, all those great things, is how can you be a humanistic profession in these particular times, and how do you need to adapt, or do you stay the course as well? So these are conversations that we really need to have, aren't
Very much so. I mean, we owe our legacy comes from the sort of, and even I mean, Agile and OD, which are the two things that you know I come from. They are both born from the human potential movement, and that has sort of associations backwards to the Asylum Institute and you know New Age and you know and this is why someone like Snowden that comes in and talks about you know we don't need this fluffy bunny stuff. But I don't think the humanistic values that was delivered to us during that era are necessarily fluffy bunny. I think they are essential and important. What we must not do is to be flag wavers around that. And I think the Agile community took it so far, talking about polarity management, it took it so far, it became anti-management, and we should not have hierarchies, we should not have leaders, all the old was out. And what we're seeing now is a return to the middle. And I think what we can do, though, is to make sure that we don't go all the way to the other polarity. The new normal is at least, you know, a few steps forward to go, as they say. Brace for impact these couple of years ahead of us, and then, you know, prepare to be ready when and look for the signals and be ready when you know we turn the other way, because we will at some point. I lived long enough to say that certainty.
So a few questions to wrap up then. So when you look back at your career, what are some of the big lessons that you take forward with you?
It's a brilliant question that warrants some thought. That's what I'm thinking. It's a very good question. It's not enough to be right. This should be on T-shirts everywhere. I engage with a lot of very bright younger people who see the system, who connect the dots, and come to me. They say this and this and this and this and this is not working out because of these reasons, and they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. But that's not enough. What are you going to do with that insight and that knowledge and that information? How will you act in complexity? And I think that's one of the catchphrases from Snowden and the Connevin company is making sense of the world so that we can act in it. Sense making itself is not that valuable. And I think a lot of people that are bright, that are young and can see things, they can't really they don't have the patience to wait for things to be fixed. And they grow frustrated and cynical, and you know that's not good. Cynicism is for people my age. If you're in between 20 and 50, as I am, you should not be a cynic. So protect yourself from that. And it's fine to be right. It's fine to see it and understand it, but then try to find a way to do something about it in some direction, a small step. Otherwise, you become old before your time.
And how do you invest in your own learning and development? You've done so much development today. What are things you focus on to keep yourself sharp?
Well, I'm an avid reader, and right now I'm actually reading this book now by Elliot Jack, a thinker that I think will come in back into favor. I don't know if you're familiar with his thinking, but he has a lot of ideas that are really based on a very outdated idea that hierarchies are natural in nature, and therefore we shall design around them. I think we are approaching an era where that will be true to many people. Some revisiting that book now, but otherwise, I try to. With my old age, I'm reading more about anthropology, history of ideas, and things like that. It's a rare occasion that I pick up a book that is specifically about OD or Agile, something like that. So I try to read wider these days. And I think also psychology does never stops to be a very interesting topic. Why do people show up and behave the way they do? I mean, it's an enigma, isn't it? And that's always so interesting. That's a deep well to draw from, I think.
Yeah, and if you ever worked that out, please come back on the podcast.
If I figure it out, I will let you know.
Is there a particular book or a podcast or kind of a piece that has particularly shaped your thinking that you'd recommend other people kind of read?
I love that you think that a podcast could have shaped me, given how old I am. They did not exist during my formative years. But thank you for that. Yes, I mean, The Fifth Discipline by Senge is such a brilliant book because it, even though it's a bit dated now, it really is a buffet of other people's thinking as well. It's not like Senge only, but he talks about many good things there. And I think everything from Ed Shine is still brilliant. I think what's that book called? The Skilled Facilitator. Have you? What's his name?
I know what you
Roger
mean.
Schwartz. Roger, yeah. It's still, after all these years, one of the best books available when it comes to developing teams. I think it's a really good book.
And that's a quick sidebar question. I mean, this is optional, but at the beginning we said that you're a writer and a musician. How's that shaped your practice?
Well, the musicianship, not so much, other than if I get given me the arrogance of someone who's been on stage in front of people and been adored for brief moments of my life. But the writing certainly very much so. In two ways, I think. I was a journalist. And I think the journalistic mindset, just asking what, who, when, why, and trying to be curious and trying to get to some kind of truth, whatever that means, that has been very helpful for me in my practice. But also, I think organizations generally appreciate good writing. It's like a skill that's, if you can convey your message in a good way, and maybe even a humorous way, which is sort of how I show up and try to make light of things, but still be serious. I think that's a combination there. And that has also helped me, I think.
And last question, one of the primary missions of this podcast is to inspire the next generation of organisation development and design practitioners, wherever they may be coming through. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out?
This will potentially sound boring. Do something else first. And I mean this in the kindest possible way. I don't know how you are expecting to show up with senior leaders with zero life experience coming right out of school, and you try to do what I do, and I guess what you do as well. I think that's a big ask. It's a big ask of the executive and the leaders to take that advice or that counsel or that sort of direction from you if you're very, very young and you don't have that much experience. And it's a big ask of you as a young practitioner to do that and hold your own in that environment that is quite can be quite hostile at times. I think I once said that there's no such thing as a junior agile coach. And this some people will be really angry with me now, so I'm dodging a bit as I'm saying it. But that was my stance after many years of agile coaching and watching people try and succeed and fail. I don't know how you will do that job. You come in with experience. I came in as a head of product, became the professional helper because I had that experience. This has given me license to talk to people, and they will listen to me. So do other things first. I mean, and that's a really boring thing to say, but
it's really interesting. It's a constant theme that's come up in the 70 episodes we recorded, is that it is often its second or third career, organisation development, and it really does help you. And sometimes it's that piece of work is understanding what drove you into OD as well. So Thomas, I want to say a huge thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Very much so.
Yeah. I feel thoroughly provoked.
Oh, did you? What provoked you?
So many things. The way in which you approach executive coaching, the combination and blend of healthy and high performance, the way in which you sort of described agile and, how it sort of lands in organizations. And you brought a sort of a real refreshing honesty and depth and precision to your answers as well. So I want to say a huge thank you. Dani, what are you taking away from today's conversation?
Yeah, I think you've kind of echoed some of the things that stood out for me. But I think the thing we talked about at the beginning about the importance of neutrality and that kind of privilege that we've got about being on the sidelines and watching people playing and kind of stepping in there. And I'd love what you said about muddying the waters a bit for people and the importance of doing that, just adding more colour and more flavour and a bit more complexity to people's potentially simplistic views. So,
well, I just want to say a huge thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much for making time in your wonderful office in Sweden today to join us.
And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing?
LinkedIn, yes, that would be it. That's the new Twitter, by the way. And please do.
If you are watching this podcast and you've really enjoyed it and you think someone else would actually really enjoy it as well, so please do feel free to share it. Dani and I are always really pleased about the number of people that just see it shares each week, isn't it? Where you may be talking to someone or working with someone you think they'd really appreciate it. So please share it. The more people that know about the podcast, the more people can learn about organisation development as well and learn about the brilliant experiences of people like Thomas, who have got this wonderful hard-fought and hard-won experience out in the front line, making meaningful, significant change in their organisations as well. So a huge thank you, Thomas. We've loved it. It's been a brilliant episode, and it joins our fantastic portfolio of guests from across the world working in wonderful and interesting organisations. And I think your organisation very much takes a place in that as well. So thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you so much.